In today's video, I want to answer one of the most commonly asked questions on this channel, and that is, how do you add bridges to your stencils? So in today's video, I'll be going over a few different examples, starting with something really easy and basic, and slowly working my way to harder examples. I'll be doing about 2 or 3 projects, and showing you all of my little techniques to add bridges to different types of stencils. So let's start with something really easy and add some bridges to this A. So now that we're in Photoshop and we're going to turn this letter A into a stencil, let me explain really quickly what an island and what a bridge is, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you were to cut out the letter A around this red line and cut all the way around and spray paint through this, what you'd end up with is something that looks like this. You'd end up losing that center portion, which is really important to the letter A. That center portion we can actually call an island because it plays a really important part in the artwork. It's something like the eyes in a portrait or something like that. So what we need to do is add a couple of bridges to hold the center portion in place. I mean, you could cut this out separately and then hold it in place while you're painting it, but it'd be really hard to get it in the perfect spot. So what we want to do is add a couple of bridges. So what I would do is I would get the eraser tool and then select the layer I want to add bridges to. And the first thing I'll do is click in the spot where I want my bridge to start. So I'm going to add one through this portion here. So I click there, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click where I want my bridge to end. And what you could see here is it's cut a line all the way through this area, and what we can call this is the bridge because it connects from the outer portion of the stencil to the inner portion, which we call the island. Now this would be pretty good if this was made from a really sturdy material, but generally you want to add more than one bridge so your stencil will be stronger and you can use it more than once. So I'm going to add another one to the opposite end of my little island here. So I'm going to click once again over here, and then holding down Shift, I'm going to click in the spot where I want my bridge to end up here. And now we've got 2 bridges holding in my island in the center. And as a stencil, this would be great. If we just cut around this black portion and spray painted through this would look really good. And if you zoomed out, it would look like a pretty good letter A. So generally, this is how we add bridges to most of our stencils. So hopefully this sort of explained the basics of adding bridges to stencils. So let's go through a more difficult example now. So for the second example today, I want to create something a little bit more complex and create a stencil of the shark and show you guys how I would do it. So to start off with, what I would do is select the subject, and that way I can separate the subject from the background by hitting Shift Control I to inverse the selection, and then hit the delete key. And that's a quick and easy way to remove the background from your image. But what you might notice if you zoom in is that the edge is still a little bit rough. Now if you want a much smoother edge, you can actually do this manually by using the pen tool and creating your own boundary. And this way you can get a much smoother line if you want to. For today's example, I'm pretty happy with this edge. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove the background because I won't be needing that. And then to create my actual stencils, what I like to use is the plugin called Wicked Stencils plugin, which you can find on the Adobe Cloud Store or from a link in the description below. The next thing you can do is hit Show Stencils. And by default, it's created a really realistic looking stencil with 12 layers. But for today's example, I want to do something pretty simple and easy. So I'm going to reduce this down to 3 and then adjust the colors. So the bottom layer will be black. Maybe reduce the amount of black by sliding these across and changing my middle color to a mid-gray, and then also adjusting my highlights so I get a little bit more highlights on that, and that way I get an even distribution of black, mid-gray and my light tone. Just play with the sliders a bit so you get heaps of detail into your stencils. And just like that, I think we got a pretty awesome looking stencil. Now the other thing I want to do quickly is just double check my corner markers. So I'm going to change it to black so we can see them. And they're pretty far out. So by adjusting the corner offset, increasing it, I can move my corner markers much closer to the subject. So I can keep increasing it till they get nice and close. And then the padding we can also adjust a little bit, and that will just increase the space from the outside to the corner markers. I'm pretty happy with where they are at the moment, so I'm going to hit OK. And what this will do is it will create all of my stencil layers for me. Now looking at each layer of the stencil, we switch off the top, the mid-gray and the black. The black, to start off with, looks okay, although I can see one spot almost immediately where I do need a bridge. You can almost see that there's like this little circle here with nothing around it. And what we'll need to do is, if we want to retain that little, I think it's an eye actually. If we want to retain that, we'll definitely have to add a bridge to that. So the way we can do that is the same as we did before, using the eraser tool and then adjusting the size to something much smaller. Selecting the correct layer, finding my mouse, I can add a tiny little bridge through there, and that will retain that little eye section there. Then what you can do is slowly inspect some other areas of your stencil through here. I think the rest of this actually looks pretty good. So now what we can do is go up to our next layer, and what we can do with this one is we can actually see that this one actually has the most amount of color in it. So if we actually move this down to the bottom, we can actually paint this color first. And the next thing we can do is also select the black, select layer, select color range, and then click on the black, hit OK. Switch the black layer off, go down to our bottom layer, hit I for ink dropper, so then this color changes to the same. Get a nice big brush and just fill all of this in. So now what I've done is I've created a base for myself to paint, and when I go to paint this first, it'll be much easier to cut out and paint. And then the other two colors can just sit on top of that. But in doing so, I've also got myself in a bit of trouble because I've also created a huge little island in here. So let's try and find a spot where we can add a bridge to this. Now, going by my previous logic, we could just go and create a bridge across here. That'll be the easiest way. But let's check our layers on top, and we can actually do that because it's hidden under the black layer above it. So if I just go Ctrl Z and remove that, if I just move that a little bit lower and created two of them, we'd end up with a much stronger couple of bridges holding this island in place. So that way when we switch on a layer above it, you can't see it at all. It's hidden behind the layer above. And we've already checked our black layer for areas where we might need bridges, and I think this one is pretty good. So next, let's check our final layer, which is white. And we can already see, if we switch off our black, because that might be a bit distracting, is that we've definitely got an area in the mouth here with nothing around it holding it in place. So once again, we can use our eraser tool and maybe just create one out of the side. But I'll show you a little trick here. Because this layer is the last one painted and it's on top, there's no way we can actually hide it. Best way to do this one is, rather than holding the shift key, I'd actually do a little zigzaggy one and try to make it look like it's part of the artwork. So that way when you zoom out, it doesn't look like it's out of place. You don't have all these nice organic lines and then one dead sharp line creating a bridge to that area there. Now, one thing I mentioned before is that we kind of need more than one bridge holding a little island in place. So if we go to the opposite side and try to do the same sort of thing, and then just using our eraser tool, trying to make it look somewhat natural. So that way when we switch on all of our layers, it doesn't look too out of place. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with this stencil. So what we can do now is export each individual layer, and we can either cut them out by hand or cut them out on machine, and they will be pretty much ready to spray paint. So that's a first example of how I'd add bridges to this particular stencil. So let's go on to another example. This image of a skull, and let's try and turn this into stencil and see how much realism we can retain. So the first thing I'm going to do is select a subject so I can remove the background, and that's created a really good selection. So let's go Control Select I, delete that. And then also delete the background layer underneath that. So we go OK. Make sure you have selection switched off. Hit delete. And then we can go to show stencils. So for this one, let's turn up the number of layers. I'm going to do a 5-layer stencil, and reducing the edge detail will increase the detail, so it'll look more realistic. Now let's adjust the colors. So we got black at the bottom, then get all of our grays nicely evenly spaced out, so it'll look way better. And then adjust all of our thresholds so they're nice and evenly spaced out. Okay, let's reduce the white a bit and increase our grays, so we got a nice balance between all of our tones. Maybe to reduce the white a bit more, increase our grays. Somewhere around here, I think it looks pretty good. I think even the top layer will have a very light grey instead of white, just so it looks a bit more realistic. Alright, now that's looking pretty good to me. We've got a lot of detail in there, got our corner markers in the right spot, so let's hit OK, create our layers, and let's go through them and add a few bridges to this as well. So going through this one, let's switch off our layer at the top first. I'll switch them all off. And then an easier way to see all of your layers is if you go G, layer, new, create new layer, okay, put that down at the bottom and then just fill that in. So that way you can actually see what your stencil is doing and what's on that particular layer. For this first one, there are a few areas I want to create a few bridges, because you can see an island here, an island here, and I think it'll be pretty good if we could retain those details. So let's get the eraser tool, create a nice little bridge here, bridge through there, on through there, and this one is usually the easiest one to go through. Also, if we could retain some detail around the teeth, I think it would help us in the end. So that's our first layer done. That was pretty quick and easy. Let's go through our second layer, which definitely needs a couple of bridges in a few spots. So let's select that layer using our eraser tool, maybe erase this outer area because that was so thin. I think we could get rid of that. Add a bridge through here, add a bridge there, and one through there. Erase that part so we can retain that little island. And through here, let's erase that part, this part, and then let's switch on the layer above and the one below so we can take a look around. I think if we erase through here, we could add a bridge to this area here, and then maybe one through there to sort of hold that little island in place, because I think that's a good bit of detail to retain. You could also erase down here a little bit. Okay, and then the other thing you can do is get your magic wand tool, select the outer area, Control Shift I to inverse the selection, go I for ink dropper tool, get the brush, and then just fill in all the rest of the details you don't want to retain. So that way you get a nice clean edge to work to, or for your machine to cut to. So that's that layer done. Let's go on to the next layer. I think this one might be a little bit more challenging because we got some more islands in the center areas that we probably want to retain as well. So same process again, get your eraser tool, erase some of the painted areas to create those islands again, and trying to hide a lot of the bridges behind the layer above if you can, because that way you end up with the best, most natural looking result and it'll just look awesome. And of course, the more time you spend doing this, cleaning each of your layers, not only will you get faster at it, but it will also look really good as a final painted artwork. So once again, we'll go and erase some of these areas. We've created one bridge there. Let's go and create one to the other side if we can. So where can I go? I'll just go straight down, I think, and just hide it behind the layer above it. That's that area done. Maybe grab the eye and then brush and fill in that. We'll probably lose that one. That's all right. And then that's that layer mostly done, I think. We can get the magic wand tool, Control Shift I, and then brush. Brush in the rest of the islands that we've lost, which is okay. And one little area I am concerned about is we've got this tiny little bridge holding this massive island in place. So, can we add another bridge to the other side of this eye socket to hold that in place? And I think we can, because if you switch on the layer above it, you can see that this area is all painted. So it'd be very easy to just get the razor tool and create a nice big bridge at the top there, because that'll be hidden, and maybe one at the bottom corner too. And you end up with a really strong bridges holding this island in place. And that'll make it much easier to paint. And I'm also wondering if these two tiny bridges will be strong enough to hold this island in place. And I think we could create a third one just through this area, a really big one, behind the layer above it. And as you can see, now we've got a nice big bridge and two tiny bridges holding this spot in place. And if you wanted to make the stencil even better, you could also add a fourth bridge through that area there. So that's the top layer done, second layer done, and let's go through our darker layers down. So let's delete our black layer, because I think that's getting distracting because we can't see our black now. And what I want to do now is just remove my darkest grey under my black. And the reason why I want to do that is so I can combine those two, because what I can do is I can go Control Shift I, timber selection, go I, big brush, and I'm on the wrong layer. Maybe that's why. Oops. Control Shift I, and just fill all of this in. So that way, at least on this layer, I have a really easy stencil to cut and spray, and this will be my base. So now what I can do is paint my black on top and the rest of my layers. And I might even move my black up to the top, so that way when you paint black last, you'll end up with some really nice crisp edges and your blacks will just prop. So that way you don't end up with some overspray of the lighter grays over the black. And bam, this stencil is ready to go. And I don't think that took very long at all. That was probably just 10 minutes to prepare this stencil. Now it'd probably take a good 40 minutes to cut this out, and you'd end up with a really amazing looking artwork with lots of awesome details in there. So hopefully this video helped explain creating bridges a little bit more, and hopefully my examples showed you how I will do it and make it a bit easier for you to apply to your stencils. So once again, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If I missed anything, or if there's something you'd like me to go over in more detail, please leave a comment below or send me an email, and I'm always happy to help you guys out. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.